Hey everybody, welcome to another deep dive with us. Today we are going to be looking at investigative journalism in the Arab world.
Very cool.
And specifically we're going to be talking about ARIJ, the Arab Reporters for Investigative Journalism.
Like go.
We've got their 2025 to 2030 strategic plan in front of us.
Yes.
And there's some really impressive work that they're doing, and in an environment that's,
Well, it's
not exactly a walk in the park, as they say.
yeah, that's putting it mildly. I mean, it's really hard to grasp the significance of ARIJ's work without understanding the really complex and often dangerous reality that they're dealing with, you know?
Right. Okay, so paint that picture for us a little bit. Set the scene for us.
Yeah.
Why is this region in particular such a tough place for journalists to operate in, especially those who are digging into sensitive issues?
I mean, imagine trying to do your jobs, expose wrongdoing, hold the powerful accountable, but knowing that every step you take could land you in huge trouble or even put your life at risk.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the daily reality for a lot of journalists across the Middle East and North Africa.
So it's not just about the usual challenges of investigative journalism.
Right.
It's amplified, exponentially by the specific political and social pressures of that region.
Exactly. Yeah, we're talking about governments that are cracking down on dissent,
right,
restricting freedom of expression, actively trying to silence voices that are critical of them.
Yeah.
And it's not just governments either.
Yeah.
You have various groups and factions with their own agendas who are all contributing to this climate of fear and intimidation.
Yeah. Wow. That's heavy stuff. And I know you mentioned this a little bit earlier, but COVID and the ongoing conflicts in the region, those things must have just made it even worse.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, those crises, they've not only heightened the dangers for journalists, but they've also kind of eroded the quality of information that's circulating in the region.
Right, yeah.
So it's a perfect storm of challenges, which makes the need for reliable, fact-checked information more critical than ever.
Huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that brings us to ARJ and the crucial role that they played in supporting those journalists who are brave enough to go out there and do this work.
Absolutely.
So give us a little rundown of ARJ. What is it all about, and how do they actually operate?
Well, ARIJ is like a lifeline for investigative journalism in the Arab world.
Okay.
It was founded in 2005, so it's the oldest and largest network of its kind.
Wow.
And it operates as a nonprofit foundation.
Okay.
With a small core team, but a reach that extends to over 3,000 individuals.
3,000? That's a whole army of truth seekers.
I know, it's incredible.
Who are all these people, and how are they connected with ARJ?
Well, it's a vast and very diverse network of reporters, editors, fact-checkers, even media lawyers, all spread across the region. So think of it as this massive support system, providing training resources and just a sense of community for journalists working in some of those challenging environments imaginable.
Yeah, so it's more than just an organization. It's like a movement, a collective effort to uphold this idea of journalistic integrity in a region where it's under constant threat.
Precisely. And they're doing it all while primarily working in Arabic, which is so crucial for reaching local audiences and having a genuine impact on the ground.
Yeah, no, that's really impressive.
Yeah.
I'm curious about the practical side of things, though.
Yeah.
How does ARJ actually support these journalists? What does that support look like in action?
Okay, so imagine you're a journalist with a burning story idea. Something, needs to be exposed, but you're maybe a little afraid to tackle it alone.
Right.
You pitch it to ARJ, and if it's selected, you're not just thrown into the deep end.
Right.
You're assigned a coach, somebody who's been there, that knows the ropes.
Oh, like a mentor guiding you through the process.
Right.
Okay.
And helping you avoid pitfalls and making sure that you're safe along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
And it's not just about guidance, though. It's about resources.
Yeah.
ARJ provides funding for investigations. They'll help connect journalists with sources and even offer legal support if things start to get a little hairy.
Yeah. Speaking of hairy situations, I have to ask about the specific dangers that journalists face in this region. I mean, we've touched on the broader political climate, but what are some real-life examples of the threats that these folks are encountering?
Sadly, the threats are all too real.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the case of Jamal Khashoggi,
Oh, yeah.
A Saudi journalist who was brutally murdered in 2018 for his critical reporting.
Wow.
Or the countless Palestinian journalists who've been killed or imprisoned just for simply doing their job.
It's unbelievable.
It's a sobering reminder of the risks that these individuals take every single day to bring us the truth.
It really highlights the courage and the dedication it takes to be an investigative journalist. Yeah.
In that part of the world. But beyond the physical threats,
right?
What other obstacles are they facing, are they coming up against?
Well, the legal landscape is a total minefield.
Okay.
Governments are constantly enacting new laws that are aimed at censoring content and silencing dissent.
Right.
You know, what it deem fake news or against national interest can land a journalist in serious trouble.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's like walking a tightrope.
Yeah.
You know, trying to report the truth while constantly looking over your shoulder, worried about the legal repercussions.
Yeah.
And then you've got the digital realm as well, which presents its own set of challenges.
Absolutely. I mean, the internet, which should be this tool for freedom of expression, right? Is often heavily censored and monitored.
Yeah.
Journalists can't even rely on digital communication without fearing surveillance and potential repercussions.
Wow. It's a complex and multi-layered web of challenges, and it's amazing that ARJ's network
is not only surviving but thriving in this environment. How do they manage to pull it off? What's their secret sauce?
Well, one key factor is their approach to training. You know, they don't just focus on traditional investigative techniques.
Right.
They equip journalists with the digital skills that they need to operate safely and effectively.
So they're not just teaching them how to find the story. They're teaching them how to protect themselves.
Exactly.
While they're doing it.
Yeah. And it's not just about defensive tactics either. You know, they're empowering journalists to actually use technology as a tool for good.
Okay, I love that. So we've established that ARJ is doing some really remarkable work in a region where it's desperately needed. But before we dive deeper into their strategies, I want to take a moment to appreciate the sheer volume of their output.
Yeah.
What kind of impact are they actually having on the ground?
Well, the numbers speak for themselves. In the past 3 years alone, they've coached over 280 journalists who've produced over 100 in-depth investigations. 60 in-depth reports, and over 40 podcasts.
That's incredible.
All covering a really wide range of critical issues.
Wow, that's a serious body of work. What kind of topics are they tackling? Give us a sense of the scope.
Yeah, they're shining a light on everything from corruption and human rights abuses to environmental issues and social injustice. You know, they're delving into stories that often get swept under the rug.
Yeah.
Holding the powerful accountable and giving a voice to the voiceless.
That's amazing. So they're not just churning out content.
Right.
They're producing high-impact journalism that's making a real difference in the region.
Precisely. And that's where their training by doing model really shines.
Okay.
You know, they're not just teaching theory. They're giving journalists real-world experience and helping them to hone their skills while producing really meaningful work.
It's like a win-win situation, you know.
Exactly.
The journalists get the support and experience they need, and the public benefits from a higher quality of investigative reporting.
Exactly. And it's all part of ARIJ's broader strategy to build a sustainable network of skilled and resilient journalists who can continue to hold the powerful accountable for years to come.
So they're not just fighting for the present, they're building for the future.
Yeah.
And that's where their 2025 to 2030 strategic plan comes in, which, as you mentioned earlier, is built on 3 key pillars.
Yes.
Empowerment, networking, and innovation.
Exactly. And those pillars aren't just buzzwords.
Okay.
They're the foundation of ARJ's approach. They're woven into everything they do.
Okay.
From how they train journalists to how they operate as an organization.
Okay. I'm intrigued. Let's dive a little deeper into these pillars and see how ARJ is putting them into action to create this meaningful change in a region where it's so desperately needed.
Absolutely.
But first, we are going to take a quick break to gather our thoughts.
Okay.
And we will be back in a flash to continue this fascinating deep dive. All right, so we're back and ready to dig into those 3 pillars we just touched on.
Yeah.
Empowerment, networking, and innovation. They really do seem to be the driving force behind everything that ARIJ does. Where should we start?
Well, let's start with empowerment. You see, ARIJ understands that simply providing training isn't enough. You know, they're actually equipping journalists with the tools and support they need to operate safely, effectively and ethically in a region where the stakes are incredibly high.
Okay, that makes sense. But what does that actually look like in practice? How do they actually empower journalists on the ground?
Well, think about the digital landscape we were discussing earlier.
Right.
It's a minefield of surveillance and censorship and hacking attempts.
Yeah.
ARIJ provides intensive training on digital safety, teaching journalists how to protect themselves, their sources, and their data.
So it's like giving them armor to navigate this treacherous digital battlefield.
That's a great way to put it. They're learning how to use encryption tools, how to navigate secure communication platforms, and even identify and avoid potential phishing scams and things like that.
Wow. That's crucial. I mean, it's one thing to find the story. It's a whole other thing to do it without putting yourself or your sources at risk.
Absolutely. And it's not just about technical skills either. ARIJ also focuses on legal empowerment.
Okay.
They train journalists on media law, helping them to understand their rights and how to navigate these complex legal frameworks in their respective countries.
So they're not just throwing them into the lion's den, they're actually giving them the knowledge and the resources to fight back.
Exactly. And it's not just about defense either.
Okay.
ARIJ is also empowering journalists to use the law as a tool for accountability.
Okay. How so?
They're training them on how to use freedom of information requests, how to file legal complaints against censorship.
Wow.
And how to hold the powerful accountable through legal means.
It's like they're equipping them with this whole arsenal of legal weapons to fight for truth and transparency.
Yeah, it's a powerful image, and it's not far off the mark.
Yeah.
But empowerment also goes beyond the individual level.
Okay.
ARIJ also works to strengthen media organizations as a whole.
So they're thinking about the entire ecosystem, not just individual players.
Precisely. They'll provide training and support to newsrooms.
Okay.
Helping them develop stronger ethical guidelines, improve their fact-checking processes, and even create more sustainable business models.
It's like they're building this whole network of fortified institutions that can withstand the pressures and the challenges of this region.
And that brings us to the second pillar.
Okay.
Networking.
All right.
Remember that sense of isolation we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
ARIJ understands that journalists, especially those doing investigative work, often feel very alone in their fight.
Yeah. It's easy to feel like you're the only one taking on these powerful forces.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So ARIJ creates opportunities for connection and collaboration and solidarity.
Okay.
Their annual forum that we mentioned earlier is a prime example.
Yeah.
It's not just a conference. It's a gathering of like-minded individuals who share this passion for truth and justice.
It's like a pep rally for investigative journalism in the Arab world.
It is kind of.
I like that.
It's a chance for them to recharge, share stories, learn from each other, and build lasting relationships. Yeah. And it's not just about the big annual event. ARIJ fosters these connections throughout the year through online platforms, regional workshops, and even just informal gatherings.
So it's this constant flow of support and encouragement and knowledge sharing. It's like a safety net for those who might otherwise feel isolated and vulnerable.
Exactly. And it's not just about emotional support either. It's about practical collaboration.
Okay.
ARIJ helps to connect journalists who are working on similar stories, so facilitating cross-border investigations and amplifying their impact.
That's smart. By working together, they can share resources and expertise, and even reduce the risks involved.
Precisely. And one of the most impactful networks that ARIJ has fostered is the Arab Fact Checkers Network.
Yes. The AFCN, we touched on that a little bit earlier. Why is that network so significant?
Well, think about the deluge of misinformation and propaganda and outright lies that are flooding the digital space, especially in a region where political tensions are already so high.
Yeah, it's like trying to find a needle in a haystack, except the haystack is on fire.
That's a very vivid image, and it's not far from the truth.
Yeah.
The AFCN brings together fact checkers from across the Arab world, providing training resources and a platform for collaboration.
So they're not just debunking individual lies, they're building this united front against the spread of misinformation.
Exactly. They're developing standardized methodologies for fact-checking, sharing best practices, and even collaborating on cross-border investigations to expose these coordinated disinformation campaigns.
It's like they're creating a shield of truth to protect the public from the onslaught of fake news.
And that shield is getting stronger every day.
Yeah.
They're even working with social media platforms to flag and remove false content.
Wow.
Directly combating the spread of harmful information.
It's amazing how they're taking on this challenge head on, and it's a testament to the power of collaboration and networking.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the third pillar, innovation,
right,
which is all about embracing new approaches and technologies to enhance their work.
Okay, so we've talked about empowering journalists, connecting them with each other.
Right.
And now it's about equipping them with the latest and greatest tools to do their jobs even better.
Precisely. And ARJ isn't afraid to push boundaries. They're experimenting with artificial intelligence to analyze data.
Wow.
Identify patterns and even generate content.
So they're not just using AI, they're embracing its potential to revolutionize investigative journalism.
They're exploring how AI can be used to sift through vast amounts of data, identify potential leads, and even automate certain tasks.
Right.
Freeing up journalists to focus on the more complex and nuanced aspects of their work.
That's fascinating. It's like having a digital sidekick
to
help them navigate this complex information landscape.
And it's not just about AI either.
Okay.
ARJ is exploring all sorts of innovative storytelling techniques.
Like what?
From data visualization and interactive maps to augmented and virtual reality experiences.
Wow. So they're not just finding the truth. They're finding new and engaging ways to tell it.
Exactly. Yeah. They understand that in today's media landscape, it's not enough to simply present the facts.
Yeah.
You have to find really creative ways to captivate your audience and make the truth stick.
And they're not just innovating in their approach to storytelling. They're also experimenting with new organizational structures and operational models.
Right. Remember those champions we discussed earlier?
Yeah.
They're a prime example of ARIJ's innovative approach to organizational structure.
Okay.
Instead of creating separate departments for things like gender equity or digital safety, they embed these experts across all teams.
Oh, okay.
Ensuring that these crucial issues are integrated into everything they do.
That's a really smart way to ensure that these priorities are kind of woven into the very fabric of the organization.
Exactly. And they're also constantly exploring new ways to ensure their financial sustainability and operational resilience. They're experimenting with crowdfunding and impact investing and even blockchain technology to diversify their funding sources and protect themselves from external pressures.
So they're not just thinking about the next story. They're thinking about the long-term survival and impact of the organization as a whole.
Precisely. And that brings us to a very crucial point, which is how ARJ manages risk in such a volatile and unpredictable environment.
Okay, this is what I've been waiting for. We've talked about the challenges, the strategies, the impact, but how do they actually mitigate the risks involved in doing this kind of work in a region where the stakes are so high?
Well, first and foremost, they have a very robust digital security protocol. They use encryption and secure communication platforms and multi-factor authentication to protect their data, their communications, and their staff.
It's like they've built a digital fortress to protect themselves from cyber attacks and surveillance.
Exactly. And it's not just about technology either. It's about training and awareness.
Okay.
They constantly train their staff on best practices for digital safety, and they have a dedicated team that monitors for threats and responds to incidents.
So they're not just relying on software, they're building this culture of security within the organization.
Precisely. And it extends beyond the digital realm as well. They have comprehensive physical security measures in place to protect their offices and their staff from potential threats.
Yeah, I imagine that's particularly important in a region where journalists often face real-world dangers.
Oh, absolutely. They have security protocols for everything from travel and meetings to public events and even personal security for journalists who are facing specific threats.
So they're really thinking about every possible angle.
They have to. It's part of their duty of care to their staff and their partners. But risk management goes beyond physical and digital security. They also have legal and financial strategies in place to protect themselves from lawsuits, censorship attempts, and even funding cuts.
Okay, so they're thinking about all the potential vulnerabilities and putting safeguards in place. It's like they're playing a multidimensional chess game.
It is.
Constantly anticipating threats and developing countermeasures.
That's a great analogy. They're always thinking several steps ahead. And they're constantly adapting their strategies to this evolving landscape of risks.
It's really impressive, and it's a testament to their commitment to not only doing this important work, but also ensuring that they can continue doing it for years to come.
And that brings us back to their 2025 to 2030 strategic plan, which outlines their vision for the future and how they plan to navigate the challenges and opportunities ahead.
Okay, so we've explored their approach to empowerment, networking, innovation, and risk management.
Right.
Now let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture. What are ARJ's long-term goals? And how do these pillars support their vision for the future?
Well, their ultimate goal is to create a thriving and sustainable ecosystem for investigative journalism in the Arab world, one where journalists feel empowered, connected, and equipped to hold the powerful accountable without fear of reprisal.
So it's about more than just surviving, it's about thriving.
Exactly. And their strategic plan outlines a roadmap for achieving that vision. You know, they're focusing on expanding their reach, deepening their impact, and building a more resilient and adaptable organization.
Okay, but how do they plan to achieve all of that in such a challenging environment?
That's where the three pillars come in. They see empowerment, networking, and innovation as the key drivers of their future success.
So it's not just about doing more of the same. It's about doing it better, smarter, and with a greater impact.
Precisely. They're constantly evaluating their programs, experimenting with new approaches, and seeking out partnerships that can amplify their impact.
It's like they're constantly evolving and adapting to the changing landscape. Always striving to stay one step ahead.
And that's what makes them so effective. You know? They're not just reacting to events. They're proactively shaping the future of investigative journalism in the Arab world.
It's truly inspiring to see an organization with such a clear vision and such a strong commitment to its mission.
It is. And they're not just talking the talk, they're walking the walk, making a real difference in the lives of journalists and the communities they serve.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, what's the key takeaway for our listeners?
Well, ARJ is a shining example of how resilience, innovation, and a deep commitment to a cause can create really meaningful change. Even in the face of adversity.
It's a powerful reminder that even in the darkest of times, the pursuit of truth and justice can prevail.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, stay tuned as we continue our exploration of ARJ and their remarkable work.
Okay.
We'll be right back after a quick break.
Sounds good.
To delve into some specific examples of their impact and the inspiring stories of the journalists they've supported. Okay, and we're back, ready to wrap up our deep dive into ARJ. We've covered a lot of ground, from the treacherous landscape they operate in to the innovative strategies they employ. But I'm really eager to hear about the tangible impact of their work. Can you share some specific examples of how ARJ has made a difference on the ground?
Absolutely. Let's talk about their work on environmental issues, for example.
Oh, okay.
They've supported investigations into things like illegal logging and toxic waste dumping, and even the impact of climate change on vulnerable communities.
So they're not just tackling corruption and human rights abuses. They're shining a light on these environmental crimes that often fly under the radar.
Exactly. And these investigations have had real-world consequences. In some cases, they've led to policy changes or legal action against polluters.
Wow.
And even the shutdown of harmful projects.
That's incredible. It really shows how investigative journalism can be a powerful tool for environmental protection.
Absolutely. And it's not just about holding corporations and governments accountable either. It's about giving a voice to those who are directly affected by these issues.
Yeah. Can you give us an example of how ARJ has empowered communities to speak out and fight for their rights?
Sure. They supported an investigation into the plight of migrant workers in the Gulf states, exposing the horrific conditions they faced. Things like forced labor and wage theft and even physical abuse.
That's heartbreaking, but sadly not surprising. Migrant workers are often exploited and marginalized, especially in regions with weak labor protections.
Exactly. And this investigation sparked a public outcry. Putting pressure on governments and companies to improve working conditions and protect the rights of these vulnerable individuals.
So it wasn't just about exposing the truth. It was about using that truth to drive positive change.
Precisely. And that's what ARIJ does so well. They don't just uncover wrongdoing. They use their platform to amplify the voices of those who are fighting for justice and accountability.
It's like they're a megaphone for the voiceless, you know, giving them the power to challenge the status quo and demand better.
And that's where their focus on supporting women journalists comes in. You know, they recognize that women often have these unique perspectives and access to stories that might otherwise go untold.
Especially in a region where women are often marginalized and silenced.
Exactly. And ARIJ provides special training and mentorship programs for women journalists.
Okay.
You know, helping them overcome the obstacles they face and become leaders in their field.
And they're not just supporting individual journalists, they're working to change the culture of newsrooms as well, making them more inclusive and equitable.
Right. You know, they're advocating for gender balance in leadership positions, promoting equal pay and opportunities, and creating a safer and more supportive environment for women journalists to thrive.
It's like they're not just reporting on social change, they're actively driving it within their own industry.
And it's not just about gender either.
Right.
It's about diversity and inclusion across the board. You know, they're supporting journalists from marginalized communities, ethnic minorities, religious groups, you know, ensuring that their voices are heard and their stories are told.
So they're creating a more representative and inclusive media landscape, which is so crucial for a healthy democracy and a vibrant civil society.
Precisely. And all of this work, this commitment to empowerment and networking and innovation, it has this ripple effect that extends far beyond individual stories and investigations.
Okay, so we've talked about the tangible impact, but what about the intangible? How has ARJ changed the perception of investigative journalism in the Arab world?
Well, they've helped to elevate the profession. You know, showing that it's not just about sensationalism or gossip. It's about holding the powerful accountable, speaking truth to power, and driving positive social change.
So they're not just producing journalism, they're shaping the very definition of what it means to be an investigative journalist in this region.
Exactly, and they've inspired this whole new generation of young journalists who are passionate about making a difference in their communities.
It's like they've created a movement, a wave of change that's washing over the entire media landscape.
And it's not just about inspiring journalists either.
Okay.
It's about building trust with the public.
Ah, yes, trust, that elusive and precious commodity.
It is.
That's so essential for a healthy democracy.
Precisely. And by upholding the highest ethical standards, by being transparent and accountable in their work. You know, ARJ has earned the trust of the public, demonstrating that investigative journalism can be a force for good.
So they're not just reporting the news, they're rebuilding faith in the very idea of a free and independent press.
Exactly. And that's perhaps their most enduring legacy. They're showing that even the most challenging of environments, truth can prevail, accountability can be achieved, and hope can be ignited.
It's a powerful message, and it's one that resonates far beyond the borders of the Arab world.
Absolutely. ARIJ's work is a testament to the universal power of investigative journalism, you know, to shine a light in dark places and inspire positive change.
Well, it's been an incredibly insightful journey exploring the world of ARIJ and the remarkable work they do. Thank you for sharing your expertise and your insights with us.
My pleasure.
And to our listeners, we hope this deep dive has left you with a deeper understanding of